Hi, and welcome to the second episode Backtested by ORIN. This time, we're going to discuss something that sounds dramatic, maybe even exaggerated. The last working day for humanity. Now, I don't mean a cinematic shutdown, no robots marching, no overnight unemployment at 40%, no headlines declaring the end. I mean something quieter. No, not quieter, more structural. Something that doesn't look like collapse at first. Something that looks like erosion. A shift so gradual that by the time we notice it, it's already normal. A day that isn't a date, more like a slope. There's a pattern that's been bothering me for a while. Not alarming, that's too strong. Unsettling. In recent years, especially in the United States, we've seen periods where GDP continues to rise. Corporate profits remain resilient. Productivity numbers hold up. And yet, job openings decline. Not crash, decline. Historically, growth required labor. Rising output and rising labor demand moved together. You wanted more production? You hired more people. That relationship was almost mechanical. But recently, there have been moments where output expands without proportional hiring. Now, I was about to say this has never happened before, but that would be careless. Economies are noisy. Cycles distort signals. Still, the decoupling is noticeable. Production appears less dependent on incremental labor, and that should make us pause, really. Let me make this less abstract. Inside firms, this is rarely framed as the future of humanity. It's framed as budgeting. A manager compares two lines: a full-time hire with salary, benefits, training time, coordination overhead, versus model access, compute, and one experienced reviewer. Even when AI output is worse on first pass, the throughput can be much higher. So the decision is often not AI or human, it's fewer humans per unit of output. Clean and brutal. That distinction matters. A lot. No villain needed. No conspiracy needed. Obviously. Just incentive arithmetic. That's it. Let me separate fact from interpretation. Fact. In many advanced economies, labor's share of national income has declined since the 1980s. Fact. Research by economists like Daron Acemoglu and Pasquale Restrepo shows that industrial robot adoption reduced employment and wages in exposed local labor markets. Fact. Studies from MIT and Stanford show measurable productivity gains when knowledge workers use AI tools, especially in coding and customer support, sometimes increasing output per worker significantly. Fact. Some firms report maintaining output growth while slowing hiring. Interpretation. The marginal unit of intelligence, the thing firms increasingly purchase, may be detaching from human hiring. Speculation, clearly labeled speculation, is that if intelligence becomes abundant, labor scarcity weakens structurally. That's not apocalypse, not even close. It's arithmetic. Uncomfortable arithmetic. For most of economic history, labor was scarce. Not morally scarce, economically scarce. Muscle was limited, time was finite. Cognition, especially complex cognition, was rare and expensive. When machines mechanized muscle, something interesting happened. Factories displaced manual labor, yes, and then rebuilt the stack. But they created engineers, managers, accountants, designers. Scarcity migrated upward, fast. Cognition remains the bottleneck, for a while. AI changes that, materially. It doesn't eliminate thinking, not entirely. It industrializes portions of thinking very quickly. Pattern recognition, text synthesis, code generation, analytical drafting, and it does so at near zero marginal cost. Near zero marginal cost matters more than headlines, much more. Because if you can replicate cognitive labor infinitely, cheaply, and instantly, what exactly is scarce? Wages are not paid for efforts at scale. They are paid for scarcity, mostly. Remove scarcity and wages compress. Not collapse, compress. Like margins in a competitive industry. Investors understand margin compression. Workers feel it differently. It shows up as slower wage growth, fewer new openings, greater competition for similar roles, more output expected per person. It doesn't feel like unemployment. It feels like dilution. Now here's where the research becomes uncomfortable. Economists distinguish between job automation and task automation. AI doesn't eliminate entire professions immediately, usually. It fragments them, piece by piece. Tasks within jobs become automatable. And when enough tasks within a job are automated, the job either shrinks or changes or splits. Task fragmentation increases labor substitutability. A lot. And substitutability weakens bargaining power. This is not theoretical at all. Clerical automation in the late 20th century eliminated entire departments. Spreadsheets replaced ledger teams quickly. Email reduced administrative layers quietly. Productivity rose clearly, but wage structures shifted. Now imagine that dynamic applied to cognitive work across sectors simultaneously. Law, finance, software, research, media, education. That simultaneity is new. The most fragile layer may be entry-level work, intern tasks, junior analyst drafts, first-pass research, baseline coding tickets. Not all of it, obviously, I know, but enough of it. And that creates a pipeline problem, a big one. If fewer juniors are hired, fewer seniors are trained later. So you can get a strange sequence. Short-term efficiency gains, long-term skill bottlenecks. Higher output now, thinner human bench later. I could be wrong, but that risk feels underpriced. There's another dimension: skill premiums. For decades, higher education delivered significant wage advantages. Skill-biased technological change rewarded complexity. But recent AI tools demonstrate that mid-tier workers using AI can often approximate high-tier output in certain domains. Not always, not universally, but enough to narrow dispersion. And that's the point. The spread between the 90th percentile and the median compresses. That is commoditization pressure. And commoditization reduces pricing power. Quietly at first, then structurally. There's also signaling. Education functions not just as training, but as certification of cognitive scarcity. If AI tools perform high-skill tasks at competent levels, credentials signal less exclusive capability. They may still signal discipline, persistence, network access, but not unique cognitive output. That weakens labor's scarcity moat. Let's widen the frame. When capital becomes cheaper relative to labor, firms substitute toward capital. This is textbook economics, basic stuff. If AI reduces the cost of cognitive capital dramatically, substitution accelerates. Who benefits? You already know. Owners of models, owners of compute infrastructure, owners of energy inputs, owners of large data sets. Who absorbs downside? Also obvious. Labor, particularly labor whose tasks are modular. This is not moral framing. It is incentive structure. There is historical precedent for labor-abundant shocks. Globalization increased effective labor supply through offshoring. That pressured wages in exposed sectors, but globalization expanded labor supply across geography. AI expands effective labor supply across cognition. That distinction matters a lot. Geographic labor arbitrage still required humans. Cognitive automation does not. Now let's introduce a more provocative framing. Modern democracies are implicitly wage-based legitimacy systems. You work, you earn, you consume, you vote. If productivity rises while labor demand stagnates, or if wages stagnate while output rises, legitimacy strains. Because citizens experience abundance statistically, but not distributively. High GDP, weak leverage, rising capital share. That combination has historically preceded tension. Not immediately, but structurally. Some argue that new industries will absorb displaced labor. History supports that possibility. The Industrial Revolution created new sectors unimaginable beforehand. Technology often complements labor before substituting. But here's the difference. Previous technologies amplified physical capacity. AI amplifies reasoning capacity. Reasoning sits upstream of many sectors. When upstream capacity becomes abundant, downstream pricing adjusts. And that may happen faster than institutional adaptation. I want to pause here, because this is where overconfidence creeps in. I could be wrong. Economic systems are adaptive. Demand may scale with productivity. Human preferences may shift toward experiences, authenticity, craftsmanship. Domains where human presence remains valued. Regulation may slow substitution. Ownership structures may decentralize. All plausible. But early signals suggest something more than cyclical fluctuation. Labor share declining. Capital concentration rising. Output decoupling episodes. AI deployment accelerating. There's also concentration risk. AI infrastructure exhibits network effects. Large models require large compute clusters. Large compute clusters require capital. Capital concentration reinforces itself. If intelligence becomes infrastructure, those who own the infrastructure shape value flows. Electric grids concentrate power. So do digital ones. There's also a quality paradox. AI increases first draft volume, but it can also increase verification load. More drafts to check, more edge cases to audit, more liability when something subtle is wrong. So scarcity may migrate again, from producing content to validating content, from writing fast to being accountable. Who can sign off? Who carries legal exposure? Who is trusted when outputs conflict? Those roles may gain bargaining power. Others may still compress. Same technology, different labor outcomes. And here's the structural question that keeps resurfacing. If intelligence becomes abundant, what becomes scarce? Energy? Compute access? Trust? Authenticity? Political permission? Scarcity never disappears. It migrates. The risk is that labor may no longer be the primary scarce input. And if labor is not scarce, wages lose leverage. That might be the true last working day. Not when jobs vanish, but when work stops anchoring bargaining power. There's an even deeper layer. Automation does not eliminate all labor. It often increases productivity per worker. That can increase total output. But if output gains accrue disproportionately to capital owners, labor's relative bargaining position weakens, even if absolute wages remain stable. You can have growth and stagnation at the same time. That combination is politically destabilizing. Howard Marks reminds investors that risk is what remains when you think you've eliminated it. Societies often assume productivity growth automatically improves median well-being. But distribution matters. Ownership matters. Control of infrastructure matters. If intelligence is industrialized, ownership of intelligence may define inequality more than labor effort. I keep returning to that phrase, the last working day. It doesn't mean the end of employment. It means the end of labor scarcity as the central economic anchor. A subtle shift from labor-constrained production to capital-constrained production. From wage negotiation to ownership leverage. From human scarcity to infrastructural scarcity. There are counter-hypotheses worth taking seriously. AI may complement most workers rather than replace them. Demand for human oversight may expand. Creativity and emotional intelligence may remain difficult to replicate. Political systems may intervene, but intervention itself acknowledges structural tension. You don't regulate abundance unless it disrupts distribution. Let me ask the uncomfortable version. If AI enables firms to scale output without scaling payroll, and if that pattern persists across sectors, what anchors income distribution? What anchors legitimacy? Universal basic income? Profit-sharing models? Ownership democratization? Those are political solutions to economic structural change, and political adaptation tends to lag. There is one final dimension: time horizon. Even if labor scarcity erodes, it may take decades. Erosion is slower than collapse, which makes it harder to mobilize around, harder to measure, harder to reverse. By the time it feels urgent, the slope may already be complete. I don't claim certainty. I may be overweighting early data. History punishes confident forecasts. But the combination deserves attention. Rising output, selective hiring restraint, declining labor share, abundant intelligence, capital concentration. That combination suggests we are running an experiment in cognitive abundance. And if we want to treat it like an experiment, we should track it like one. Not by vibes, by indicators. Revenue per employee by sector. Junior hiring share versus senior hiring share. Wage growth for early career cognitive workers versus productivity growth. Compute and model spends versus payroll growth. Labor share trends inside AI-intensive firms. If those move in one direction for several years, that is less cycle and more structure. The last working day for humanity might not be an event. It might be an equilibrium shift. A moment, invisible at the time, when labor ceased being the bottleneck. And once scarcity migrates, power migrates with it. That's one interpretation, not the only one. If you find this kind of thinking useful, you can subscribe. And until next time, we'll keep backtesting the present.